Hello and welcome. I am so very honored to be speaking at the Faith Business Success Summit, and am grateful to Dr. Paulette Harper for trusting her community to me. My name is Adrienne Tichy, and I have been a recovery advocate for 15 years in a village where 20% of the population is in recovery, plus the thousands more in active addiction. And it's getting harder and harder nationwide to stay well long-term without help. That's where I come in. Today, we gather to shed light on the evolving landscape of addiction, particularly for entrepreneurs and people of faith. In the 21st century, addiction affects people from all walks of life: mothers, politicians, first responders, pastors, CEOs. This is not just an isolated individual concern. It's a societal crisis that demands our attention and action. So I'm sure some of you are wondering about the white elephant in the room. Why would I be talking at the Faith Business Success Summit about addiction? Well, this disease has already infiltrated our American society. Despite fentanyl being mentioned on every TV set, very few people would know what to do if addiction came calling at their door. Some of the traits that make phenomenal entrepreneurs and people of faith are also traits that might set them up for a predisposition for addiction later in life. Almost everyone knows someone who has been impacted by addiction, but have no idea how to help. And addiction, overdose, suicide, and mental health issues are up 40% since 2019. I won't mislead you. The changing face of addiction is not going to be your normal talk. I've had enough on the front lines of addiction to stay silent any longer. The statistics are grim. Only 11% of Americans who need recovery actually get to treatment, and 40 to 60% of them will relapse within a year. We must do better. So who I'm talking to today: the first group, those of you who are addicted, and those of you who don't know you're addicted. The second group, everyone that loves them, works with them, interacts with them. So what does that look like? Looks like the mother that's passed out on the sofa because she just cannot keep up with her household duties anymore. She's hiding liquor in the laundry room and in the kitchen. We've got the young man who is just raging at the computer screen and playing a shoot 'em up game with all of his friends he's made on the internet when his family is upstairs wondering if he'll ever come out of the basement. You've got the grandmother who's counting her pills to make sure that she can sell enough, but still keep enough that she can be out of pain so she can eat this month. Or the doctor that's frustrated because no matter what we could try to come up with as a solution to this insidious disease, we all are frustrated. So what are the learning objectives today? First, we're going to understand modern addiction. Then we're going to talk about the commonalities of people of faith, entrepreneurs, and addiction. Finally, we'll talk about recovery, rehabilitation, and next steps. Addiction in the 21st century has infiltrated our American society, affecting approximately 15% of people across the board. Your skin color, your religion, your socioeconomic status, your gender, or your political affiliation does not matter. Because the face of addiction has changed, we must change the face of recovery too. Often when someone hears the word alcoholic or addict, they get visions of someone homeless in the gutter or the junkie on the street. Actually, addiction and recovery looks more like you and me today. Remember, this situation did not appear out of a vacuum. Addiction is as old as time itself. But stress levels are out the roof since 2019, and people are not coping well. There are several reasons. It's okay, socially, to take something to get started in the morning and something to go to bed. Adverse childhood experiences increase risk of addiction and mental health, and the more you have, the more at risk you are. Many Americans think that as long as they go to work and provide for their family, there's no way they have a problem. And high-pressure jobs have a direct correlation with increased stress, leading to coping behaviors. Addiction is defined as a chronic relapsing disorder characterized by compulsive drug seeking, continued use despite harmful consequences, and long-lasting changes in the brain. It is considered both a complex brain disorder and a mental illness. That's from SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Now, what that doesn't talk about is the 80 to 90% of the population who does not have a clinical diagnosis of addiction. It is not pathological, but still can be problematic. You can have binge drinking. You can have recreational drug use. You can have a whiskey aficionado, but not clinically addicted. Now, the rise of behavioral addictions are not mentioned in the official definition, but many people have turned to negative activities to cope, such as gambling, shopping, eating, gaming, and screen time. Although initially less deadly, behavioral addictions are still dangerous. If you owe money to the bookie, they're going to come to your family calling for it, not you. These examples underscore that addiction of any kind is not a moral failing, but a complex medical condition that requires comprehensive treatment and support. So what is the current situation? College kids are dying from accidental poisoning. Stress and mental health issues are out the roof. 50 million people self-identified as addicted in 2023. Infants are dying in daycares where they're selling fentanyl out the back. Professionals and executives are flocking to my area for a 2-week vacation detox and have to show back up on that third Monday with their direct reports, like they know what they're doing. They will not succeed without help. Suicide and mental health issues are up 40% since 2019. Because the border is open, illegal drugs are streaming into this country. The average treatment stay of 28 days is not enough to address a lifetime of addiction. People you trust, doctors, pilots, teachers, are also struggling with addiction themselves. And many people know of someone who has died from an overdose. Since the onset of the pandemic, overall addiction rates for alcohol increased by 23%, while drug consumption spiked by 16%. Also, there was a 15% increase in deaths due to overdose from 20 to 21, and they happen to be more frequently women than men. 7.7 million adults in the US have a co-occurring disorder like anxiety, depression, or bipolar. According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, it cost the US more than $740 billion in 2023. So what are the commonalities of people of faith, entrepreneurs, and addiction? Entrepreneurs that are a higher risk for problematic behaviors because of the high level of stress, loneliness, and fear of failure. This can lead to risk-taking behaviors, such as taking considerable personal risk, working excessive hours, sometimes to the point of obsession, problem-solving skills. They're constantly having to think outside the box. Drugs actually affect the executive center of the brain, so they are challenged in that area. And also social pressures to indulge in potentially risky behavior are often encouraged. Then there's the need for continuous improvement. Entrepreneurship can be a lonely journey, so they're constantly focusing on learning and improving to stay competitive. This can easily lead to taking substances to enhance your natural capabilities so you can get more done, which of course then leads to taking something to go back to sleep. So how does this manifest? Well, obsessive thoughts, laying awake at night thinking of business, not sleeping at all, ignoring other responsibilities, withdrawal and engagement cycle, feeling either anticipation or relief, depending on whether you can get the drug or behavior or not. Increased tolerance. More drugs and behaviors are needed to feel that high. Eventually, more are needed just to function normally. Then there's negative outcomes and neglect. Relationships become more strained. Family matters and withdrawal symptoms can be excruciating. Feelings of guilt and shame might overtake you. Then the role of faith in addiction. There's the biological and genetic factors. Some individuals have a genetic predisposition to addiction, making them more susceptible regardless of their faith. So we're talking about, let's say you had a predisposition to diabetes, and one person that had a predisposition to diabetes watched their food intake, they exercised and limited the sugar. The other one ate ice cream, didn't exercise, and didn't really particularly alter their diet at all. One doesn't get diabetes, the other does. Well, it's the same with addiction. If you're predisposed and you continue to put yourself around that situation and continue to take those substances or engage in those behaviors, you will eventually run down the road of addiction. Then there's the psychological factors. We already mentioned the mental health issues that are up. We saw mostly addiction, secondary mental health 5 years ago, but now we're seeing mostly mental health issues with people using substances to mitigate their symptoms. So that they're using it as a coping mechanism for stress, particularly in these uncertain times. And it's always a negative coping mechanism. Then there's the societal and cultural factors. You might come from a family who has drinks at the table. You might come from a family that smokes recreational marijuana. Some of the churches that you go to might have alcohol at every function that you go at. And then there's those people that don't want to take communion because it's wine when they could offer grape juice. The good news, there is evidence that those of faith, regardless of what faith that is, were more likely to stay in recovery. Let me repeat that. There is evidence that those of faith, regardless of what faith that is, were more likely to stay in recovery. In fact, a 2019 study from the Baylor University and published in the Journal of Religion and Health looked at the role of religious and spiritual faith in preserving and recovering from substance use disorder. The study found that 73% of substance abuse treatment program incorporated some kind of spiritual component. And congregations, through their support of recovery programs, provide $316 billion every year. Those with strong religious beliefs are as much as 8 times less likely to use illegal drugs and 5 times less likely to binge drink. So how can you help? Addiction is rarely a straight line. There are many steps forward and some back. Patients can get caught in a recovery merry-go-round if they're not aware of the systems in place. So do your research, talk with your doctor, suggest treatment, speak with your pastor or priest, hire someone who does interventions for a living, send your loved one to a recovery residence so they can continue on with their sobriety journey. What can you do if you love someone impacted by addiction? Please warn your loved ones about dangerous substances and behaviors. The stuff that's out there today is killing everyone. And it is just insidious. It is in marijuana, it is in Adderall, it is in Xanax. In fact, there's no Xanax in it. It's all fentanyl. It's no Adderall. It's all fentanyl. Or meth is the same thing. They've put something in meth that's killing all the meth users. So in addition to the hard drugs, we're also talking about this is spilling over into high school and college students. There's intentional poisoning. Those little girls that died in the daycare center weren't addicts. They were poisoned. And then you have accidental addiction. That's where, you know, before the pandemic, you went out a couple of times with the guys for a beer, and now you're delivering a 6-pack or a 12-pack to your house every day. When people started going back to work, 20% of the people couldn't because they had gotten addicted. Cultivate empathy. Most people do not aspire to be addicted. Love people where they're at. Encourage them to seek recovery, to keep at it, to keep going, and learn about initiatives in your area. There are plenty of resources in every town. You can just even put in recovery resources into Google and then your town and see what comes up. Go maybe to the second or third or fourth page, but you can find something in your area. And if you can't find something, consider start something. See things from your loved one's perspective. Addiction is a lonely situation, so be a comfort. Celebrate those small wins. You know, when you first come to recovery, you get a white chip, and that's a sign of surrender. That's when your counting time starts. Then you get a chip at 30 days and 60 days and 90 days, and then 6 months and a year. So it's intentionally set up to do all of the big celebrations in the beginning, 60, 90. Then you can wait a little bit longer and wait until 6 months. And then you can wait 6 months longer and get to a year. So you celebrate, but it's also teaching to have delayed gratification. Encourage your loved ones to keep going, even if it's hard. So here's some resources for addiction and recovery. Recovery from anything can be confusing and frustrating for both individuals and their loved ones. I created the ABCs of recovery to be a guide necessary to fully recover. A, accept your situation and take action. B, be brave enough to start over and over and over as many times as necessary to reach your goals. And C, cultivate a stellar support system. So accept and act. Determine what you can and can't control. Do your research and then make a plan of action. Be brave. Most people rarely recover on their first try. Do not quit. Keep going. Develop resistance for the times when you don't want to start over. So that muscle is already built and will serve you. Cultivating support. Consider a community of faith. Find a sponsor or mentor. Attend groups that support your recovery. Then there's national resources. There's 12-step meetings for individuals such as AA.org, NA.org, or CA.org. The meetings for loved ones is Al-Anon.org. And then additional meeting for individuals is Recovery Dharma, Celebrate Recovery, Smart Recovery, and Families Anonymous. Then you have the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, which I mentioned earlier. That's the National Clearinghouse for Addiction and Mental Health. Lastly, there's the brand new 988 Suicide and Mental Health Crisis Hotline. So moving forward, continue having those hard conversations. Keep the lines of communication open. Consider joining a support group. Get help from your church family. Make self-care a priority. You can't help fill someone else's cup if yours is empty. How we can help. Well, we have a recovery residence community that's in person for 1 year for 15 men called the Lodge at Delray Beach. We also have a non-clinical case management recovery advocacy program called the Lodge 360, a virtual year-long recovery program called Recovery Comes Home, and a podcast called Recovery Comes Home Radio. As we conclude today's presentation, I hope you leave with a deeper understanding of the changing face of addiction. This issue touches us all, and it's time we take collective action to address it. Whether you're someone struggling with this situation, a loved one, or a concerned community leader, there are steps you can take to make a difference. Help is available and recovery is possible. Wherever there is breath, there is hope. Let's work together to support those in need and create a future where addiction no longer holds such a powerful grip on our society. Now, I have a gift for you. If you go to recoverycomeshome.com/resources, you will get a relapse prevention cheat sheet. And if you if you scan the QR code at the upper right-hand corner of the screen, you can find me anywhere. That's my digital landing page. It's got all the websites and phone numbers and email addresses and every place to call me. Remember, you don't have to get help from us, but please get help somewhere. Thank you.